The dumbest thing I have ever done. I have done some truly dumb things in the past, but nothing nearly as spectacular as the time I came up with a new way to fill a waterbed in just minutes, compared to hours doing it the traditional method. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the 14th floor of Rochdale in downtown Toronto in the mid-70s. I had been living here for more than a year while I was attending George Brown College on Queen Street, taking a course in fashion design. I had just finished building an 8-foot-long work table for rolling out material, cutting out patterns, and creating and illustrating designs for school. I noticed the walls in my place looked grungy and shabby, so I decided to give them a coat of paint. I picked out a bright strawberry red paint to transform the space into a more energetic and inspiring environment for my design work. Before I could commence painting, I had to move everything out of the living room, including a king-size waterbed. The painting went smoothly, with no hitches, and I was happy with the results. Now, all I had to do was put everything back. I decided to leave the waterbed for last because it would take 2 people to fill it. I called Penelope and asked if she could come over next weekend to help me fill my waterbed, and she said sure. Saturday night was a typical hot summer evening in Toronto, and I had all my windows wide open, letting in a cool breeze and the sound of a crowd of people milling about in the street below, trying to beat the heat. Penelope showed up around 9 p.m., and I told her how I was going to fill the waterbed and what I needed her to do. "Are you crazy?" she said. "You want to fill the waterbed with a fire hose from the hallway?" I assured her that I knew what I was doing and that there was nothing to worry about. All she had to do was turn the tap on when I told her to and off when the bed was full, and I would hold the water hose nozzle in the bed. Waterbeds usually take hours to fill, but the idea of speeding up the process by using the fire hose instead of a regular garden hose was, to me, beyond brilliant. It will fill the bed much more quickly. And with that, we head out into the hallway to get the fire hose. With Penelope stationed at the fire hose valve, I carried the hose into the living room and inserted the nozzle into the waterbed. As I did this, I noticed the nozzle was much larger than I had anticipated, and it didn't fit securely into the bed's valve. That's when a warning bell went off in my head. This might be a bad idea, I thought. Water could leak out. But then I thought, as long as I keep a firm grip on the nozzle, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So I shouted to Penelope to turn on the water. The pressure of the water gushing from the hose took me by surprise. I tightened my grip on the hose, only to find myself struggling to keep it in the waterbed. It felt like I was holding on to a wild animal, squirming to break free of its captivity. Just then, Penelope came flying into the room, shouting, "It's leaking! The hose is leaking!" I looked up at her and said, "It's okay. It's supposed to do that. Don't worry about it." At least that's what I assumed. Since the hose is canvas, the water will slowly trickle out until it's saturated, at which point the leak will stop. Without saying a word, but with a look of exasperation and doubt, she turned and headed back out into the hall. Suddenly, I lost my grip on the hose. It slipped out of my hands with such force that the wild animal was free, and water careened onto my freshly painted walls, then splashed back, soaking everything in the room. My pictures, my artwork, my designs, everything. I attempted to reinsert the nozzle, but there was no way, so I ended up holding onto the hose as water sprayed everywhere. I yelled to Penelope, "Turn it off, turn it off." but she turned the valve the wrong way, increasing the flow. At this point, I was utterly overwhelmed and began panicking. Then I remembered the windows were open, so I aimed the hose out the window, and in astonishment, I watched how far out into space the stream of water reached. And that's when I heard the sound of screams rising out of the darkness. Out of exasperation, I finally dropped the hose and ran out into the hallway to turn off the water myself. And that's when I saw what Penelope meant when she said there was a leak. There was a leak, all right, but it wasn't just a trickle. It was a fountain of water spraying high into the air, gushing from a hole in the hose. I got to the tap, turned off the water, then slowly turned around and surveyed the damage. It was not a pretty sight. The entire hallway was at least an inch deep in water. It looked like a tornado had gone through it. There was water everywhere, and everything was soaking, including Penelope and me. Ultimately, my neighbors began showing up. Their apartments had been inundated with water as well, and they understandably were furious. I knew I had messed up, and I apologized profusely, offering to pay for the damage. However, it was still a long time before anyone would say hi to me if they saw me in the hall or at the elevators. And as for Penelope, she never came around again. The end.